like hope is an interesting topic, and I have to admit that finding hope under current circumstances is difficult. What is difficult is not being optimistic or having a positive attitude or trusting that all will be just fine no matter what, and that after all we all display enough of patience, everything turns back into normal. That's not having hope in my mind. That's the exact opposite of being pessimistic, which is believing that all will be bad no matter what. Hope is not a belief. Having hope acknowledges that the outcome is uncertain, and that carries efforts to change or modify what is to come. In other words, hope is not and shall not be a passive belief. It shouldn't be indulging in optimism or finding a refuge in pessimism. And that's certainly not easy. It is not easy, particularly in times of great uncertainty, the one we are in now, as we need to accept, or yeah, we have to be ready for equally for both alternative outcomes. That this could lead us to the worst of the times, or that this could lead us to the best of the times. Why we don't need to agree with this dramatic ends of spectrum. What we perhaps can agree upon is that things will hardly be as they used to be, as they were before. As we cannot go back, and we cannot go back, we better view this as a time of great warning, but also as a time of great opportunity. For having hope, optimistic mind, belief, trust, desire, all of them are important, but alone they are not enough. Hope is something which should be communicated with action, and what we shall possess now is the hope in being capable of changing this paradigm shift of century into new opportunities. Obviously, we can talk endlessly about how this could have been and can be turned into formative experience, great reconsidering of priorities, or creating new habits. The truth is that uncertainty is personally and socially destabilizing. It is clear that this crisis will leave marks on the societies, and we can see it now, and the news are coming every day from various parts of the world. So the challenge is not only in having hope, the challenge is primarily in having reasonable hope in the face of great uncertainty. And there are reasons good enough for having it without underestimating terrible human cost and terrible economic impact. We can admit that also great things have been done. Individual fundraising, positive acts of compassion, seen from neighborhoods to hospitals, helping strangers. In the UK, for instance, 500,000 people signed up to volunteer in the health scheme in the end of March. It was nearly five people per second, and it doubled the governmental target, which was 250,000 volunteers, 250,000 people. In general, we can say that people responded more with solidarity and less with cynicism and resentment. They responded more with compassion and conscience-based actions. Talking about compassion and conscience, I find it as a nice serendipity that the first anniversary of the International Day of Conscience was celebrated this year on the 5th of April. This day was launched last year on the 25th of July in Vienna with the adoption of General Assembly Resolution 73-329 and the prior declaration. What is this day about? What it stands for? It commemorates the importance of the human conscience in promoting a culture of peace. It defines the conscience as a compass for human beings, guiding them to the path of harmony and truth when they are facing tough decision challenges and other difficulties. And I think that it deserves celebration through the action of people who might have not even heard about this UN action about the existence of such a day. So we could test it in practice, how it looks. And that's one of the beautiful things, certainly worthy of getting a hope from. Another truth is that truth can be learned from COVID-19 crisis is, and I would borrow the words of the Secretary General Guterres, his April's address. No one is safe until all of us are safe. Or in other words, there is no national security without human security, or there is no international security without human security. It is clear that if multilateral and bilateral partners, if they could create opportunities to support the most vulnerable, and not only within the national borders, within the state boundaries, all would benefit. And I think that at least Syrian and Yemen conflicts, they already show that inaction has terribly negative consequences for all of us. Yet something like this would fall on deaf ears of those who would rather intensify exploitation of the crisis to redefine human rights, democracy, freedoms, other traditional values, perhaps redefining order eventually. So we shouldn't be complacent. It is extremely difficult to make soft authoritarians turn full-fledged dictators to give up restrictive measures, including surveillance. And it might get more difficult not only in those cases, but in general. And yes, coronavirus pandemics has already redefined what composes security threat. And as the international landscape shifts, the defense will follow. The NATO members, they are expected to spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense, not even mentioning the money that have been spent by certain individual states alone and money they want to spend or they plan to spend on defense in future. It just suffices to say that the amount of money spent on non-existential human security threats, such as pandemics, climate change, this is very little in comparison to money spent on defense. Although, to be fair, some complain that governments are cutting military spending as a result of the pandemics. Yet, according to the Global Health Security Index released last October 2019, among 195 assessed countries, none of them was fully prepared to manage pandemics or even epidemics. The overall global health security capabilities score was 40.2 over 100. China's index resulted for 45 under the label prevention measures out of 50 and 48.6 under the label responsiveness out of an overall rank 47. As bad as it is, coronavirus gave us a chance to check the accuracy of the index. Unfortunately, we have been shown that the index was right. The UN Charter starts with the words, "We, the peoples of the United Nations," not the states of the United Nations. So why has it been so difficult to admit that human security must be a priority and that the cooperation is urgently needed? The reality, and perhaps the answer, is that not only each age group has been affected differently by the deadly virus and its consequences. Social segments of the societies today have got different empirical account about what's happening. In other words, there is perhaps not enough unifying experience yet at the largest scales in societies, let aside the states. Some might cynically add that we haven't had it bad enough in order to start cooperating. Security Council has been largely silent since the beginning. No resolution has been adopted following the Secretary General Guterres' call for the global ceasefire due to veto in fights, and neither G7 nor G20 performed better, perhaps again due to the same reason. But polarization is seen also along the political lines, and I'm not referring to the news now today and the recent news. I'm referring to the ABC and Ipsos poll data that in US, for example, 65% of Republicans want the American economy to reopen right now, while only 6% of Democrats do. So why is it so? Findings of the project run by Rand Corporation, named Truth Decay, show that 4 main trends in the societies might be blamed for it. And you wouldn't be surprised by them. I'm positive about that. These are the disagreements about facts and data, such as safety of the vaccines, then blurring of the lines between facts and opinions, and also increasing volume of opinions compared to facts, And finally, declining trust in governments and media, which are the institutions which are supposed to provide facts. These cleavages, they have been there with high probability for some time, and COVID-19 crisis only strengthened them and shed some more light on them. It is like with other shocks, I think, pandemics, natural disasters. These events, they create shocks, and shocks only exaggerate already existing trends. And in fact, it might not be really a bad thing that this pandemic exacerbated these tendencies, because they became more obvious, and hopefully it would be then a bit easier to address them. Similarly to what has been mentioned, hope-based and induced action might build up on the desire to end some of the conflicts. Special Coordinator for Middle East peace process recently stated that the recognition of this interdependence could, if there is a political will, translate into tangible progress towards resolving the conflict, offering at least some glimmers of hope, even in one of the most intractable conflicts like the one in Israel and Palestine is. Also, petition following the UN Secretary General's call for a global ceasefire, individuals reacted differently than states, to enable to battle this common threat together, has been signed by some 2.3 million people. I think 2.5 million people is needed. So if local ceasefires are possible, why we should not rethink disarmament and reintegration? Another example, in my view, useful example, is a renewed debate about universal basic income. According to Oxford University survey, 68% of British youth and 71% of other European youth believe that basic income should be universal. One can argue for or against. I mean, there are valid arguments on both sides, citing, for instance, Finland example. Yet as the economic consequences of coronavirus become more real, it might be necessary to rethink and think about UBI in some kind of form, together with investment in healthcare, good job creation scheme, support for environment-friendly businesses so they choose to pay taxes at home. Shall we keep the societies sound? This crisis also made clear to us how badly unprepared for pandemics we were, and we are in general. The question is whether we would be able to learn from this and understand that the same unpreparedness can hit us very hard when it comes to climate change, for instance. The problem is that pandemic collided with the environmental emergency. Although the head of the International Energy Agency believes that the transition to clean energy should be smooth and it shouldn't be compromised by today's crisis, there might simply not be enough of money to do that. And still we haven't reduced green gases emissions in line with scientific data. And if we don't do it by 2030, experts say, then we would face existential human threats. So, and the financial cost of inaction is estimated at $600 trillion by the end of the century. There might be a silver lining in this time of great warning. Although not really officially yet, it seems that the UN is going to launch the first Youth Council on Environmental Issues this year. Without predicting the real impact of the council, any step towards empowering youth in this field is more than necessary and welcome. And youth in general does deserve more attention, and not only because of 53% of young Europeans trust authoritarian regimes more than democracies with climate change, according to Oxford University survey. Simply when it comes to discourse and analysis of these pandemics, I believe that young people have been impacted the most by the pandemics, but that's a discussion for another panel. So how to wrap all this up? This virus will stay here for some time, and when this one passes, another might strike. We might develop vaccine, or we won't. So the question is not what we do if we don't have a vaccine. The question is what we do with our lives, not then and if, but now, what we do with them right now. It is true that what we have been going through is one of its own kind, a paradigm shift in history. and hardly there is a way back. And it's also true that transformative pain may be more than we can bear. But some aspects of this shift would become obvious sooner or later anyway, with or without pandemics. There's nothing can be gained from yearning for old good times. We better see the new opportunities in silver lining of everything that this cloud has brought about. And we better learn from how unprepared we were caught out this time. During the lockdowns, we were physically distancing. That's correct. But we were not really socially distancing. Many of you probably have attended more conferences and meetings than in the times when we used to live in a relative health security. And it was IT that has helped us to be more human, and it's helping us now. There are many things to demonstrate hope-based actions, to cooperate, to continue having discourse on reshaping societies, to claim back moral language from marginal and radical groups, and to appreciate each other, to appreciate each other as human beings, not only as human doings. So while acknowledging fears that the government responses may lead to authoritarianism and over-securitization, we can imagine and also hope that this virus crisis brings about cooperative collective action and transparency and reminds us of interdependence and shared humanity. And if society is a social contract, this shall be an opportunity to try to construct it better. Thank you.